Everyone, my name is Brian and I'm the owner and lead designer at Color Cloud 3D. Come along with us today as we design a candlestick in Blender using an amazing resource called a Bezier Curve. Let's check it out. We're going to go through this lesson today by deleting the cube and adding a Bezier Curve. The Bezier Curve can be found in the Curve selection menu for adding a new object, and when you add the Bezier Curve to the scene, you'll see that you have this little line segment here. Now, going into edit mode with tab, you can click and select all the points of the Bezier curve. A Bezier curve is a set of control points where the points in between influence the curve of the line. These are often used in vector, and font, and animation designs. When you selected in edit mode the points of the Bezier curve, you're going to hit X for delete and choose all vertices. Now, there is actually still a point left. You can see it here when I move the point around with G. What we're going to do is use that point as our origin, essentially, and draw in edit mode the outline of our candlestick. So using tab to go into edit mode and finding the the draw tool, we can begin drawing our candlestick. Now, if you draw your design and it goes past the outer line, it's not a huge deal, but do try to take your time and draw it as neatly as you can. Make sure, at least for my suggestion, you have the horizon line near the bottom, so when you want to draw it to the top, you don't run out of room. So here we go. I'm going to start from the origin, and I'm going to draw a little bit along the y-axis here before I start coming up. Now, if you have a stylus pen, that of course would be very helpful for this type of activity. I don't have my stylus today. I'm just using my mouse, and I think something like this will probably work, going and touching the z-axis line. So once you've drawn your shape and you go back to the selection tool, if you need to make any fine-tune adjustments, you can click and drag and select points. You can use G to move those points around. You can rotate with R and so on. I'm pretty happy with the overall shape, so it's time to turn this into a three-dimensional representation of the Bezier curve, and that is done using the screw modifier. So tab to leave edit mode, and clicking the blue wrench, we can find our modifiers. And you're going to search for screw. Now, this is the amazing part, because when you click on screw, it will go ahead and take that Bezier curve and wrap it around the z-axis, and there is our candlestick, which looks pretty great so far. Now, it is just the wooden structure of the candlestick, or metal if that's what the look you're going for is. So let's give it some color for what we would like it to look like. So over in that same menu on the right-hand side of the screen, you can find the Material tab, the red circle there. Then click New to add a new material. Once you've added a new material, you can begin choosing the different colors that you would like. Now, the problem is, if you're choosing a color on this particular view, you're not going to be able to see it. In viewport shading, you're only going to see a 3D representation of the object and some shading. You don't have access to any of the lighting effects that it takes to illuminate or show the color and texture of your mesh. So there we go. There is my base color. Now I can drag this around and I can find a color that more suits the look that I'm going for. So I'll go with a shade of brown like this. Scrolling down in that same menu, if you like, you can go ahead and add a little bit of more detail or appearance by dragging the roughness. So the roughness makes it very almost wet-like. Looks like icing or frosting or melting chocolate with the roughness all the way down. You add the roughness back, it becomes more matte and almost clay-like. Okay, so I want a little bit of reflection on my materials, so I think right about the starting point looks pretty good. So there is the outline of my candlestick. Now we're going to use a cylinder to finish this up here. So Shift A to add a new object. We're going to choose Mesh and choose the cylinder. S for scale. G and Z moves it along the Z-axis, and here we go. Now it's time to make the actual wax part of our candle. As we get it into position, we can S for scale and Z along the Z-axis and make this candle a little bit larger. You may have noticed from our designs, if you're thinking about making a candlestick similar to that, we have two different versions. We have one with a shorter base and shorter wax, and one with the taller, and so on. So there we go. There is my wax. Now it's a little bit primitive in its appearance. So what I'd like to do is actually go into edit mode and add a bevel. So using 1, 2, and 3, you can switch between choosing points. 2 is for lines, and 3 is for faces. I want to select the face at the top of the wax on the candle here, and once the face is selected, I'm on Mac, I'm going to do Command B. Should be Control B for a Windows user, and then scrolling my mouse wheel, I get to add more lines to this bevel. Now, I think something about like that looks good, moving my mouse into position, and when you click, it will add a bevel to that shape, and it gives it a much more rounded appearance, and I think looks much better. There we go. I'm going to right click Shade Smooth, and overall that looks pretty good, I would say. So it's a small detail. I think if I wanted to taper it, I might just want to choose that face. You can go into wireframe mode here and snap on the axis and maybe scale that in a little bit. Let's use proportional. All right, that looks pretty good. So I think what I'd like to do now is add the wick. So there's our candle, we got our candlestick. So Shift A, we're gonna add another cylinder, and we're gonna scale it down. And G and Z to move it up on the axis. Whoops. Now, the wick, you have some different options. For one, I wanna go ahead and add a new material. So from my material tab on the right, choose new. With my material that I've just added, change it to be black. Maybe turn my roughness down. By the way, this is just for the rendering portion. This, has nothing to do with the way it will be 3D printed, but when you're trying to find a style of what something could look like, it's pretty fun to mess with. So there's our wick, and I'm gonna make it a little bit taller. Now this is where you can get a little bit extra creative. For one, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to add a bevel here, and there we go with Command B, and right click and Shade Smooth. If you were to go into edit mode and hit Command R or Control R for Windows, it allows you to add new horizontal line segments across this wick, and I want to add a decent amount. Okay, and then once I've left clicked, I can move those into different locations. So now I have more horizontal lines on this wick. I'm going to actually switch out of this view so we can see it more easily. Now, if you want to select an entire line across the screen, you can do that a couple of different ways. But I like to go into wireframe mode and click and drag my mouse, and that way I can see all the way through and get all points of that line. If I were to use S for scale, it's going to scale the entire thing down. If I have proportional editing on, which I did not mean to do. If you want to turn on proportional editing, you can check that box up there. But anyways, S for scale brings this in. And I can also use Shift and select other parts of my candle, and I can scale just those in. So that gives a little bit better of a look, I would say. But perhaps it's not quite where we want it yet. So I'm going to hit Command Z to go back. If you've selected these areas and scaled it in to make this tapered effect, and you hit R for rotate, you can pivot this a little bit in different directions. You can use R and X to rotate it front and back, at least, and R and Y, you can rotate this way, and R and Z twists it. Okay, so you got a couple different options there, but I think at this point that's probably going to do it. There is our candle. Now you could go back in and add some detail for the flame. You might need to scale this up a little bit so it's not so fragile when printing. Maybe you need to scale up the wax, bring that down a little bit. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. There is the candle designed in Blender. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you again in the future. Drop us a message if you enjoyed this video. Leave us a comment if you have any questions or have any suggestions for future videos. Reach out, and hope we can talk soon. Take care. Bye for now.